Hello and welcome to my channel In Search of Wonder. My name is Anne and today I'm just gonna come out and say it. There's no such thing as spoilers. Today is Friday, both when I'm filming this, incidentally, and when I hope to post it live on YouTube. And it's a bonus Friday video. Normally I post on Sunday and Wednesday, but this is a series that I've been wanting to start for a while and I just haven't been able to fit it into my regular schedule for the month. So I just decided to make an extra one because I just want to get these thoughts off my chest. So I don't know how often I will be making these videos. I have a few ideas in mind for them. I don't know when I will get to them. We'll see. But here's the first one because this is a big one. And I just have to say it. There's no such thing as spoilers. And I know that is an incredibly hot take and an extremely unpopular opinion right now, because currently a huge trend, and it's been like building, for years. And it's always been there like a little bit because, yeah, it's always been there a little bit, but it's been a building trend. I think things like BookTube and Book Talk or whatever have intensified it, this concept of not wanting a book to be spoiled. And I really feel like in the past 5 years, like it's gotten to a point where it's almost a fever pitch and it's almost become like culturally unacceptable and unbelievably rude if a person should dare to mention something that happens in a story that's not obvious from the title or whatever. People even get uptight about the blurb on the back of a book because they feel like if they read too much, then the whole story is going to be spoiled for them because they're already going to know what's happened and then they won't want to read the book anymore. I don't know, it's just become culturally like this is the thing. Like we don't spoil a book, and spoiling a book is a terrible thing. It's very rude. It's a horrible thing to do and you should never do it. So I try to be kind and warn if I'm going to give spoilers when I'm discussing a book. And I'm aware of this cultural phenomenon. And I'm not trying to ruin anybody's day or anybody's reading experience. So I don't go out of my way to give spoilers. In fact, I go out of my way to try not to give spoilers. So it's not like I don't care about your feelings or people's feelings, but I personally have zero problem with spoilers. And I personally don't think that knowing what happens in a book spoils anything for anybody. I think there's no such thing as spoilers. There's only good books, or good writing, I should say, and bad writing. And that's the difference. That's the only difference. If you know what's going to happen in a story and that spoils the story for you, then it is not compelling enough of a story or compelling enough writing to keep you reading. And it's not the fact that you know what's going to happen. It's just the fact that it's not well written, or it's not a compelling story, or perhaps it's just not an interesting enough story for you or for the person who feels like it has been spoiled. Now, I'm not just going to say that and throw that hot take out into the world without some defense of it. So here is my defense, my reasoning behind my opinion, because I do have reasons, concrete reasons, and fairly objective reasons as to why spoilers don't actually spoil anything. So hear me out. Just be patient. Just hear me out. I know it's a strange idea, but maybe you might be able to acknowledge a little bit of how I see things. And also, I acknowledge I see things in a way very different from most people. I always have. And so I've gotten kind of used to it. So I very, very, very often have differing opinions from many people on things, especially if it's not something that's, unalterable fact or truth like that. We all are forced to acknowledge. But when it comes to the grayer area of opinion in matters and stuff like this, I tend to see things a little bit differently. So I'm used to it. And I'm used to people disagreeing with me. So that's okay also, if you disagree with me. And also, I've said that a lot, but I feel like this is probably going to be, I have like a few main things that I want to say about this, but I do feel like it's going to be a bit of a rambly video. It's already been a bit rambly so far, so just bear with me. I'm just going to think out loud through this concept of spoilers and our relationship with books and reading And we're going to throw movies and TV adaptations in there too. So first of all, and my primary thought process is this. If, and by spoilers, I mean knowing ahead of time key elements that happen in a plot or plot twists before you actually actively read a book or watch a movie or a TV show. If a spoiler actually spoiled a story, then we would never reread a book. We would never watch a movie adaptation of a book or watch a movie again or watch any other adaptation of a story. We just wouldn't, because the experience would be spoiled. It would not be interesting. We would not be entertained, and we would have no desire to do it. So we just wouldn't. However, the vast majority of us, we may not all reread books, because not everybody chooses to reread books. I didn't used to. It's a newer development in my life of rereading books. So I know not everybody rereads books, but I do. And I have found that some of the readers who are able to read well, who are able to read very closely, who are able to develop a rich and intimate knowledge with the book, are readers who do reread, which is one reason why I have started rereading more in the past few years. Because I think it lends itself to a richer and deeper relationship with books, particularly classics, but it doesn't have to be classics. There are some books that I have enjoyed rereading that are not classics. So if you ever reread a book and the rereading process is just as rich and rewarding or more so than the first time you read it, then that completely eliminates the argument that spoilers spoil anything. At the very least, it eliminates that argument for all spoilers across the board everywhere. Clearly, if you can read a book for the second or third or more time, then knowing what happens in the story is not enough to ruin the experience for you. Merely knowing what is going to happen in the story is not enough to make it no longer an enjoyable experience. In fact, I would venture to say for the best books, knowing the storyline ahead of time, having read the story once already and being able to read it at a deeper level the second or third or fourth time through is actually a much more richly rewarding experience, and therefore is the opposite of being spoiled. Same with watching a movie or an adaptation. Now, I know that, when you watch a movie, it's a sort of a different level. When you're watching an adaptation of a book that you've already read, it's different. There's it's an enhanced in a way, visually at least, and orally. Like you see things and you hear things in a new way via someone else's imagination, usually like multiple other people's imagination being brought to the story that you're already familiar with. And so that adds a whole lot of extra layers to it. So it's something different. It's not the same as rereading the book. But even so, you know the basic idea of what's going to happen. I read Sense and Sensibility recently. I read it for the third time. This was the most enjoyable reading experience of Sense and Sensibility that I had had in all of the times I have read it. Part of that is because I forgot many of the details in the 2 years since I last read it. But it had only been 2 years. It's not like I've completely forgotten the story. So I knew what was going to happen mostly. I knew the sequence of events. I knew the characters in the story. But reading it was a richly rewarding experience this time around because I was familiar with it. And so I was able to see different things in the story. I was able to catch different nuances of things that Jane Austen was trying to say. And it was still an enjoyable, pleasurable experience for me. In fact, more so than the first 2 times I read it. On top of that, the last time I read Sense and Sensibility 2 years ago, I immediately watched the BBC adaptation of it that I had not yet seen. I think it was like a 2006 adaptation, maybe. I'm not sure exactly when it was made. But at any rate, there was a BBC adaptation of Sense and Sensibility that I had not yet seen that I wanted to see. And I watched it almost immediately after reading the book. And having just read the book did not spoil the movie for me. I knew what was going to happen. I knew the basic storyline, but I thoroughly enjoyed watching it play out on the screen. And same thing happened this time around. We just watched Sense and Sensibility, the 1995 adaptation, which, by the way, I have seen before. And we watched it in the month proceeding, having read the book, and watching the movie was not spoiled because we already knew what was going to happen and we'd already read the book. In fact, it enhanced the enjoyment of it. So I don't think that categorically anyone can say that all spoilers are wrong all the time, or that all spoilers spoil the enjoyment of a book, because it's simply not true. You can watch a movie more than once, you can read a book more than once, and have just as much enjoyment in the succeeding times as you did the first time watching or reading it. And very often you can have more enjoyment the second or third time around. In fact, I feel like knowing the basic plot points ahead of time is actually super helpful when you go to read a book, particularly a more complex book, such as a classic or a contemporary book with a more complex plot or with a large number of characters. When you just go into it blind and you don't know much about what is happening or what is going on, you're trying to figure out the details, you're trying to figure out the basic story, and you miss a lot of nuance, and you miss a lot of detail, and you miss a lot of things that actually can help create a more pleasant reading experience. A lot of people complain because the introduction at the beginning of a classic novel will often spoil the novel because it will include all the major plot points of the story, and it will give a little bit of analysis and understanding of them. That, I don't always read the introduction to a classic novel, but it has never once spoiled a novel for me, even if it does tell me everything that happens in the story, because it gives me a framework for reading the story. It gives me a structure. In situations like that, okay, so imagine there's like a house, okay? It's being built. The foundation is laid. Let's say the foundation is the blurb on the back of the book, or the title or the picture on the cover. It's just a very basic concept of the story, what to expect in it, what it's going to be like, the genre, etc. That's the foundation, okay? That doesn't usually bother anybody. Some people don't even like it that much, but at least the foundation gives you a footprint idea. Like, you get an idea, how big is this house or this building going to be? What sort of, building is it going to be? That sort of stuff. And then you get the framework of the house. A lot of times that's what you might find when you read a introduction in a classic novel. Or if you go to SparkNotes or someplace like that and they give you the basic plot structure of the story. Or if you're listening to a person review a book and they give you the basic plot line. That's the framework. But if all you see is the foundation and the framework, you haven't seen the whole picture yet. You haven't seen the whole story. You don't know what the walls look like on the outside. You don't know how the rooms have been decorated on the inside. You don't know necessarily the floor plan of the experience of, walking through the rooms in the house, what that is going to be like or feel like. Is it going to be like a Gothic castle that's spooky with surprises around every corner and dark and gloomy and you never know what you're going to see? Or is it going to be bright and airy and cheerful and you're going to be excited about opening each new door and seeing what's there? There's wonderful new treasures in every room for you to see. You don't know what the experience is going to be until you open the door and walk in it, or until you open the book and actually read the whole book. There is so much more to a story than is plotline. I guess this is maybe a third point, but also definitely connected to my second point. The plotline is just the framework. All of the rest of the stuff is the actual experience of the story. How it is narrated, how it is told, how you relate to the characters, what emotions you are feeling and experiencing as you walk through those rooms, as you read through that book, as you experience that story for the first time, or the second, or third, or fourth time. Even if you already know the basic framework of what's going to happen, it's still a new experience. You're still enjoying each new development, because it's being uncovered as you go, and the details are being added to make it still an interesting and absorbing experience. But if it's not, if knowing the basic plot line of a book ruins the book for you, then My contention is that it's just not well written. It's just either the book is not well written, or it's not the right book for you, or maybe it's not the right time for you to read the book. Maybe you're just not in the right mood for it. Maybe you're not in the mood to walk through a spooky haunted castle. Maybe you're in the mood for the light and airy house with the open floor plan and delights in every corner. Maybe the rooms are just bare. Maybe you have the basic plot line and that's all there is. That's what I mean by poor writing. It's just the framework. It's just the walls. It's just drywall. There's no personality to the story. There's nothing unique. There aren't, the characters are bland. Nothing is drawing you in. Nothing is compelling you to read. It's poor writing. It's a poor story. It wasn't the fact that some poor soul told you what was going to happen that ruined it for you. It just wasn't a good book to start with. That's a possibility. It's not true every time. I wouldn't say that that's true in every situation where a book is spoiled legitimately, but I would venture to say that it's definitely a possibility. If a book has been spoiled for you, it's possible it just wasn't very well written. It just wasn't an interesting book to start with. My other contention would be that there are nowadays in contemporary books, and I'm not talking about classics at this point, I'm talking about just your everyday average book. There are so many tropes out there, and it even exists in classic novels and types, character types. You know, there's a reason there are character types. There's a reason there are tropes. There are things that we expect to happen in the course of a story. We expect a story to take a certain course. We expect certain types of characters to act in a certain way. There are expectations, and those expectations exist for a reason, because there are patterns in everyday life. There are observable patterns in everyday life. And if a book does not reflect those patterns to an extent, then it is not a well-written book. So there will always be a certain level of predictability in a book. There's a certain level in which you will know in the end what is going to happen in one way or another. Maybe not in the specific details, but in the overall form and the overall structure. You have a good idea going into it if it's going to be a happy ending or not. For example, in the romance genre, you know within the first 2 chapters, 90% of the time, who's going to get together. In a mystery, you generally find out pretty quickly on what has happened, what needs to be solved. And they're just these tropes and these types, and that once you recognize them in a book, then you already know what's happening anyway. We thrive on a balance of predictability and surprise. There's always going to be a healthy level of predictability, and there's always going to be an element of surprise. When there is only predictability or only surprise, the book will suffer. So I think that it's silly to completely remove or try to remove all predictability from the reading experience, because there is a certain level where it has to be. It's going to be there. It's going to exist. You cannot remove that level of predictability. Now, I do want to say, I think that there are some books where, because there's such an interesting plot twist, or there's like an ending that is like a gut punch sort of ending, or perhaps like a thriller or a suspense kind of story, where the whole thing that keeps you reading is not knowing what's going to happen. There are certain books where I can understand why you wouldn't want that to be spoiled before reading it. I think that a mystery, even if you know who done it before you read it, I think is still can be an interesting read if it's a well-written mystery, just because you see everything unfold as the story goes on, and you can still look for the clues, and you can still uncover the mystery as it goes along, because you're still putting the pieces together. Like, you may have seen the cover of the puzzle, but you haven't put all the pieces together, and it's still fun to put those pieces together. Like a suspense or thriller novel, I think that genre might be one where it's probably better not to be spoiled, because then the whole point of the book is to be suspenseful, and if you already know what's happening, it may not be as suspenseful. I don't know. I still think a well-written book would be enjoyable, even if it is a suspense or a thriller, and even if you know what's going to happen, if it's really well-written and engaging, and you're walking through that spooky castle. Like, when we go to a haunted house, There's a farm in our area that every Halloween, they do these haunted things. And so they do it the exact same every year. Like, they don't change it. It's exactly the same route that you go. It's the same thing that happens. It's the same things that spook you. But every time they still spook you, right? Because it's happening, but still when it happens, it's so sudden. And maybe even because you are on edge, you're like, I know it's going to happen. I know it's going to happen. And then it happens. So even in then, I think there's room to say, I don't think it necessarily has to be spoiled. And then, the books with like the gut punch ending, if you know it's going to happen. So, and also there are some books that have like a very unique sort of way of telling the story. And, it might be true that the first time reading it through, it is better not to know too much about the mechanics of the story and how it's working, because you kind of want to discover that as you go along. So I do think that there are some exceptions to this. There are some things where it's probably true that it's better to read it not knowing anything going in, but I think that's extremely rare. And it's certainly not at the level at which spoilers are treated today, and the way people expect that nothing should be revealed about the plot line of a book before they get into it. And they just want to experience it blind from the beginning. One example for me is Ethan Frome by Edith Wharton. Ethan Frome is one of those books that has a gut punch ending. Don't worry, I'm not going to spoil it for you, okay? I can't remember if I watched the movie first or I read the book. But in either case, whichever one, whether I watched the movie or read the book first, when I went to do the other one, I went to watch the movie or read the book, I knew what was going to happen. And it was like a surprising gut punch sort of ending. I knew it was going to happen, but that didn't stop me from thoroughly immersing myself in the experience, thoroughly enjoying the story that was being told. Enjoy is kind of maybe the wrong word, but thoroughly immersing myself in the experience of reading this book or watching this movie, and being gripped by the story that was being told. It is a very gripping story. And it still was a gut punch of an ending. Still. And I reread it last summer. And I did have some qualms about picking it up and reading it again, because I knew what the ending was. And the ending, the powerful ending, is part of what makes it such a good book. And I was a little bit concerned picking it up for this reread. And I did think, well, I know what's going to happen at the end, so it's not going to be as emotional for me as it was the first time that I experienced reading this book. And that's simply not true. Now, maybe if I read it back to back, one right after the other, that would be true. But since it had been years since I had previously read it, I still knew what happened. Still, technically, it was spoiled for me because I knew how it ended. It was still a gut punch. I can still picture myself sitting on my deck reading it in the summer and just being like, like the ending is just so, it still shocks you. It's like, the skeleton that jumps out at you at the haunted house. Like, it's coming, it's going to be there, but when it happens, it still startles you and shakes you, just because it's really well written, and you're drawn so much into the story. It doesn't matter that you know what's coming. When it comes, you're so gripped by it. So for all of these reasons, I personally embrace spoilers. And if there is any way that spoilers spoil a book, I will say it is this. And I'm stepping on toes here. It is that worrying about spoilers will reduce your enjoyment in reading, but even more so, it will reduce your enjoyment in discussing books. And it will reduce your enjoyment in reading because you will be afraid to read the blurb on the back of a book. You will be afraid to read commentary on the book, whether it's the introduction to the book or the foreword, or whether it is somebody's endorsement of the book, whether it is people's reviews on Goodreads. You will be afraid to get any information about the book. You will be anxious to avoid spoilers about a book. So you will not be able to engage in the wider world of the book, which is part of the reading experience. And you're missing out on a lot, in my opinion, because of that. Because I get a great deal of enjoyment about reading reading other people's reviews. I read reviews extensively on Goodreads before and after I read a book. It gives me a great deal of insight into the book that I'm reading. I listen to booktubers talk about their books, and it helps me when they give in-depth reviews that include spoilers. It helps me to know whether or not it's a book I will want to read or not, and it prepares me when I actually go to read the book to know what I will expect and what I will find. And I enjoy reading analysis of a book before, during, and after reading it. It enhances my enjoyment of the story. It gives me a greater appreciation for the story. So I think when you actively avoid spoilers, you close yourself out of a lot of possible enjoyment of the entire reading experience. And another aspect is, I remember back last fall in Victober, one of the group reads, or the group read was The Doctor's Wife by Mary Elizabeth Braddon, is that her name? And a lot of people, there was a lot of chatter about the fact that in this book, the book Dombey and Son by Charles Dickens is spoiled. I think that I have read Dombey and Son, but I'm not 100% sure. I haven't marked it off on Goodreads. Parts of the storyline sound really familiar. The names of the characters sound really familiar to me, so I think that I did read it. I just didn't mark it on Goodreads for whatever reason. This would have been some years ago. I probably have already read it, but it's been so long that I couldn't tell you much about the story as it is. And so that didn't bother me when I went to pick up The Doctor's Wife, the fact that I would be spoiled by, that Dombey and Son would be spoiled for me by reading it. Because in the book, what happened was the main character she was comparing herself and her experience with some characters in the book Dombey and Son, because she was a great reader. She'd read a lot of books, and she had, made some connections between herself and the character in Dombey and Son. So there was an element of foreshadowing there in The Doctor's Wife, and there was an element of analysis there. It gave you a deeper appreciation for the character in The Doctor's Wife, but it didn't take anything away from Dombey and Son. Even if you didn't know anything about the storyline about Dombey and Son, and you heard, you read those things that were in there, it would not take away from your appreciation, because there is so much in Dickens' writing. It's so richly detailed. It would be like, okay, so back to my analogy of the house. Imagine that it's like the Jan Brett version of a house, right? Jan Brett is a children's author, a picture book illustrator, and her pictures in her books have so many tiny little details all over the place. And you can read the book 100 times, and each time you can stare at the pictures and each time come up with some new details. That's what Dickens' writing is like. It's so detailed. It's so rich in details. There's so much in there that you could walk through the Dickens house of books. The walls would be covered with details, like detailed little paintings and little pictures from floor to ceiling. And you would have to walk through it multiple times to notice it all and remember it all. So a few little comments about certain characters in the book and the things they experience in the book are not going to spoil that experience for you. You're still going to be able to enjoy that experience. There will be so much still for you to look at there that the things that you already know are in the book will not take away from that. So that is my hot take, and I am very opinionated on the subject, as you can see. Obviously, other people are very opinionated, but with the opposite opinion to me, and in fact, the vast majority of people, I think, it seems like, have the exact opposite opinion of me to this issue of spoilers. So, but I know my fellow unspoiled people are out there. So if you are, just give me a little hey in the comments and let me know your thoughts about spoilers. And if you actively avoid spoilers, I am really just curious to hear your thoughts about any of the things that I said. I'm sure the argument can be made for, counter arguments can be made to everything that I've said. So I'm sure that there are reasons to support your position. But let me know in the comments what you think about spoilers, how you feel about them. Do you actively avoid them? Do they make you angry? That's the part that I really don't get. I don't understand. Even if you don't like spoilers, I encourage you, please, don't let it spoil your day, okay? Don't get angry about it. Don't get mad at somebody for spoiling you. Just smile and move on. Life is gonna be okay. It's gonna be fantastic. All right, that is my hot take. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And I'm a little bit nervous about this because, I don't usually put my my contrary opinions out there quite so blatantly. So hopefully everybody still loves me and I don't lose like 900 of my followers in one fell swoop. But let me know what you think in the comments, and I will see you next time. Bye.